coaching. Kunoa coaching.
Welcome to the Kunoa podcast today, everybody. We've got Dennis with us. Dennis, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you. We've got some sunshine, finally. So I think it's about the same temperature there as it is here. So I'm actually really enjoying it right now in the middle of the summer. Although this will go out in September, so it might be a little bit cooler by then. But yeah.
Yeah, who knows what we'll get in September.
It could be raining.
Exactly.
So
I'm.
Oh, go on. You go.
Well, I'm in Eastern Washington. I'm in Eastern Washington State, so it's on the west coast of the United States. And September is about the time of year where if you don't like the weather, just wait 15 minutes, you'll get something else. So I'm not sure what it'll be like in England at that time, but certainly in Washington State, it's a little bit varied at that time.
What, really? I mean, it's like spring here. You can get snow and rain and warm in one day. Is it like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It is like that. We've kind of just left that part of the year now. And so from now on, it'll be mostly summer, high temperatures and very little rain.
That just sounds beautiful after the rain that we've had over here during winter.
Yeah,
so,
I'm a big rugby fan.
Oh, go on.
I'm a big rugby fan, and so I've seen a lot of the games kind of not really rained out, but you could tell it's pouring down while the lads are playing there. So it's, I sympathize with you.
Absolutely. I'm a member of the cricket and rugby club, and we've not even been able to really play very much yet because it's just been completely raining for the whole year.
Yep, I'm sure.
So fingers crossed for some better weather. So Dennis, I am so interested in your background. Do you want to kind of give everybody an indication of kind of who you are and how you got where you are now?
So my name's Dennis Mossburg. I have about 17 years experience working in prisons. And then after that, I'm now working as a parole officer. I'm sure you have something very similar in the UK. But during that 17 years in prisons, I got a lot of experience working in, as you can imagine, high stress situations, scenarios, and leading teams in that environment. Ranging from, medical emergencies to large scale fights, and then, trying to retake institutions. And during that time, I became involved in what in the States we call incident command system. I think the UK probably has something similar. I know Canada uses the same thing, but it's basically a framework to manage emergencies, natural disasters, wildfires, tornadoes, hurricanes, that sort of thing. And so getting involved with that, I've been able to respond to the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii a couple of years ago, a hurricane in North Carolina a couple of years ago. I've been involved with some forest fires, just any manner of other things, including, of course, this year, COVID and last year. So I've been able to look at leadership in a vast array of high stress situations. And I kind of bring that perspective to coaching, management, and leadership to help you sail the smooth seas and build those relationships that you need so that when stress does hit your organization, such as COVID, then you're not playing catch up. You're already used to dealing with those kind of stressful situations.
So this is something that we touched on a few times in the podcast and in the courses, but I think it's such a critical thing to understand. When you're working as a leader in crisis, what do you think are the key differences between if you're just, leading normally and there's not a crisis on hand, as opposed to you've got, a computer breach, a volcano eruption, a hurricane? What do you think are the main differences in the leadership?
The main difference is that when you're in those emergencies, you're reverting to more of the command and control kind of leadership. There's not a lot of time for servant leadership, and I'm not dismissing any other of those theories at all, but time is really crucial, and sometimes you have to get out orders and people have to follow them, and sometimes you're going to be a little abrupt and people just have to understand, well, this is an emergency, this is what we have to do. But it's because you've spent time building that servant leadership format, all of those things during the smooth sailing when things are normal, that you can use the command and control. And keep in mind, even during emergencies, there are times where things have lulled, things have slowed down some, so now you can start, reverting back to that servant leadership or whatever your usual style is. Take advantage of those times, because you can't force people to just blindly follow, for 24, 48 hours or a couple of weeks, depending on the emergency. So you have to be able to be flexible enough to switch back and forth between those two modes.
How do you kind of go into these situations? Do you have to have a relationship with the team, or what happens if you have to take a team on and then you're in crisis and you have to manage that team? How can you, I think probably most of our listeners would say, how can you build that respect and that rapport so fast to be able to get people to do these things for you that you need?
It can be really, I almost hate to use the word dynamic because I think that's overused, but certainly it can be a fast changing paced situation. In the prisons, I typically have the luxury of working with the people I'm with for long periods of time. We've built that rapport. Sometimes on these natural disaster deployments, I'm not working with the same people. I'm not working with people I've worked with all the time, especially when we go, say, to North Carolina. We took 8 people from Washington State to help one of the counties deal with the hurricane. Well, we're from Washington. We're on the complete opposite side of the country. None of us have been in a hurricane or know anything about it. So the best way to do it is to come in with your technical knowledge and then just ask questions. People want to feel that they're valued, and you do that by asking questions. You need to ask them, what are our resources? How do we handle this situation? Especially in the hurricane, it was, what are the weather conditions tend to be like? What areas tend to get flooded? And because you start building that rapport by asking questions right away, you get buy-in a lot quicker. Sometimes you're just triage and you're trying to just patch up as many holes as you can, but remember to ask questions when you can so that you get their buy-in.
Some listeners might say, if I was supposed to lead a crisis situation, I'd just go in and start giving them orders because there's not time and I need them to do what I need to do. That might not work for a number of reasons, because you've not got the rapport, you've not got the relationship. But it also might not work because you're making the wrong decision. So how can you be confident in these really serious times of crisis that you're actually making the right decision as a leader?
So North Carolina is a great example of this. Like I said, none of us have ever been in a hurricane, and we showed up in the small county emergency response center. And when we arrived, they had been going 36 to 48 hours without or with minimal sleep, trying to deploy their resources as best they can. And there's always a period of overlap in these situations. So we went in for our briefing, and you could tell these people were exhausted. And even then, we took that tactical time out to ask the questions. We had to ask the questions. We had to figure out what they've done so far and what resources they have and how we can help. That's the biggest thing. Ask that question. How can we help? We couldn't go into that situation and just start barking orders because we didn't know the situation. We didn't know what was going on. So if you're like that coming into an unknown situation, ask, how can I help? That's going to be the biggest thing to ask them. If it's a situation you're a little more familiar with, that transition period is going to be a lot shorter because you already have a framework and understanding of what the situation's like. You more or less need to know where they are now and what those capabilities are. That might be a little more command and control right off the bat, but just going in command and control with a bunch of people you don't know does not work out well at all. You're going to be asked to leave pretty quickly.
How do you know when the situation demands command and control, and how can you execute that effectively for a good outcome?
Really, it kind of depends on your comfort with the situation. Do you know the answers? Do you have a pretty good idea of the answers? Do you really know what the situation is? And until you know that, you're not going to be able to go into command and control. Because what are you commanding and controlling? You don't even know that yet. So you want that period of overlap, that period of understanding, so that you can figure out what's going on. When we showed up there, they were very anxious to have us in North Carolina, and you could tell they wanted to throw a lot of stuff at us right away, and I don't blame them because they'd been at it for a long time. They were tired. But it was incumbent upon us to do what we call a tactical timeout. Like, let's slow down. Hurricane's still here. There are ongoing operations in the field. Let's figure out here at the Emergency Operations Center what's going on and how we can help you. I wouldn't really switch into command and control situation until you really felt comfortable with what you know and what assets you have and what's actually going on, because you'll make things a lot worse if you just come in and start barking orders straight away.
You're listening to the Kuinua podcast. If you want to ask a question to our experts, just go to kuinuacoaching.com and you will find the link to the podcast where you can leave us a voice message or send us an email, and we will ask your question direct to the expert. That's kuinuacoaching.com. Kuinua Coaching is set up to offer mentoring, coaching and courses in leadership, negotiation and soft skills. If you're interested in finding out more about what Kuinua Coaching has to offer you, you can get in touch via Facebook, Instagram. You can type Kuinua into Google. You can email us on kuinuacoaching@gmail.com or go to our website at kuinuacoaching.com. That's kuinuacoaching.com. When you get put into this situation, sometimes it's easy to think that you do have all the information to make a decision, and people might actually push back and say that's not the right decision. How can you know when, one, you've got enough information, and two, you're working well enough with your team that you can make that decision and it's based on some really good, information basis? You're not just making it and discarding some really important things that you might need.
That is a delicate situation, isn't it? And oftentimes that involves our ego. When we think we know everything, then we stop listening and we stop asking those questions. Don't put yourself in that condition. On the other hand, there are points of time where iterative decision making is a really good idea. At least get going in one direction, and then you can adjust based on any new information. So ask enough questions that you feel comfortable that, okay, at least we're going in the right direction here, and then you can fine tune it as you go along. But if you start feeling that you're getting that pushback, it's worth it to back up a little bit. Even if you give some direction, okay, guys, let's start doing this. We'll have some more conversation and we'll get back to you. But when you start feeling that pushback, that's when you want to stop and ask yourself, is this an ego thing or is this a knowledge thing? And sometimes that could be tough to figure out.
Have you got any tips for anybody that might be on that kind of knife edge and need to figure that out?
I think it really requires a lot of emotional awareness. I'm naturally an introvert, and introverts are really good at reading body language anyway, because we don't want to engage conversation if we don't have to, right? But the other part of that is being able to go in and read body language, understand what's going on with people, and pick up their paraverbals, their tones, their inflections, and try to figure that part out. Is there something I'm missing here? Always ask yourself that question. What am I missing here? And then if you start doubting yourself, or you start having that question in your mind, that's a good sign that it's probably time to step back, get the ego out of the way, and start asking more questions.
A really interesting question that I was actually thinking about, because you've dealt with, wildfires, volcanoes, corrections, takeover of facilities. Have you ever, as a leader, been kind of scared of these, this situation, your safety, the decisions you need to make? And what did you do if you did feel that way?
Um, you have to have some bit of fear going into these things. It's one of the biggest ways to overcome that is trust in the rest of your team. Honestly, if you're working in those environments and there isn't some level of fear, you probably need to start asking yourself some very serious questions. That's probably ego driven right there. One of my best examples was, again, in North Carolina. We were driving to the county, and they initially weren't going to send anybody to this county because the roads were impassable. And then I think they looked at us and said, well, you guys don't know what you're getting into, so you go. And we are driving on the freeway. We're the only people on the freeway. Just rain, sleet, sideways, cars being blown across the road. And I was just behind the driver in the back seat, just staring at my phone. I did not want to look out those windows, but I had trust in my team getting us there, and trust knowing the rest of my team that we were going to fight together to survive this thing, no matter what. That's all it is. You're going to go into every situation like this with a little bit of fear, but you got to trust your team. And without that, it's all going to be ego driven.
When you talk about ego and emotional intelligence, and really a lot of this stuff is hanging on how self-aware are you as a leader, how can somebody start to build their emotional intelligence in order to handle these situations better?
That's an excellent question, isn't it? And it's, for some people, it comes pretty naturally, and then other times, and I'm one of these people, I've had to work at it. Probably one of the best ways to do that, though, is your listeners are probably going to get tired of this, but asking questions, trying to put yourself in that other person's shoe, not just judging like, oh, well, they've gone through this, I've been through that, so this is how they need to deal with it. People deal with things much differently. So you've got to be willing to listen, and you've got to try to figure out how whatever the event is impacting them. Just the understanding of the empathy of another person. Empathy and sympathy are two different things. Sympathy means that you feel sorry for them for their loss or whatever they're going through. Empathy is understanding what they're going through. Maybe not completely, but at least having understanding, like, gosh, if I were going through that situation, I would feel pretty bad. And then not judging how they're dealing with that situation, because we don't know what's in their past. But what we need to do is try to help them get through their current situation.
It can be really complex as well, being in a command and control role, because you're not just kind of directing a team. You've got a huge amount of information coming in, a huge amount of information going out. You've got a lot of different teams that are doing different things on the ground. How do you kind of manage that information flow?
One thing about the incident command system that we use in the United States is that you delegate a lot of the responsibilities. So you have people dealing with certain tasks, and then they report back to you on how they're doing. And that helps you kind of detach and step back and take that 30,000-foot view. We know that people can't process, especially in high stress environments like that, they can't process a bunch of different information streams. In austere conditions, combat conditions, for example, they say 3 to 4 people is all of your span of control. In ICS, we go 3 to 7, with 5 being kind of optimal. That just shows how little the human brain can actually process at any given time, especially in an emergency. So if you find yourself getting overwhelmed with too much information coming in, it's time to start delegating some of those tasks and duties to other people.
Do you work it out so that you have briefs from different people, so you get kind of short bulletins, and then they can kind of condense the information for you so that you can make decisions more effectively?
Absolutely. Yeah. You're going to be getting short briefs in from very specific people about very specific tasks, and then that all takes a larger role in the future planning going forward. But that gives you the little bite-sized chunks of manageable chunks of information for you to deal with that problem at that time.
Is it difficult to set up this kind of center where you've got the delegation and the information coming in and out, and you've got different teams acting on different things? Is it hard to set up that kind of initial center when you get onto the scene?
It can be. It can be very, very rough. That's one reason why the framework was created in the first place, so that you could take people from thousands of miles away, and they can work together using this common framework. And as long as you establish each individual role and what each person is responsible for, and people aren't, we call it traveling out of your lane, that helps manage and set up that system. If we're all going in reading the same book, then we know how to structure the system after that. If not for that, then it would be chaos trying to manage these incidents.
Are there kind of, because I suppose to the layman it might appear that there's not really that many crossovers between a volcano, a hurricane, and a corrections facility being taken over, but are there real similarities between these situations in what you as a leader need to accomplish?
The biggest commonality would be chaos. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainties, but having that pre-structured framework, that schema set up, we know that no matter what it is, we don't have to think about how we're going to get set up. We just have to go in there and do the job. So when you're responding to these other things, I don't have to be a subject matter expert in volcanoes or forest fires or hurricanes or anything like that. I just have to know how to organize the people who are subject matter experts in those areas. And once we get that organization, coordination set, then we can go off. And I'm not going to make any decisions without good advice from the people who are the subject matter experts. I'm going to get their input and listen to them, and then we'll go forward.
Do you get to any point where it becomes kind of an adrenaline rush and you actually enjoy this type of situation, or is it always kind of a fear angle? How does it feel to be in that situation?
Oh, it's definitely both. There is a lot of adrenaline, and what we found is we typically do 2-week deployments, because anything beyond that 14 days, you really start, you hit burnout, you put in a lot of hours, you expended a lot of mental energy. There's definitely an adrenaline portion to it. There's fear, but there's also just this desire to help other people and help the community. So fortunately, I found a way to kind of combine all three of those things into one area.
When you kind of speak about as well, A-type personalities, would you be able to kind of just tell us a bit about what that is and how it works and what you've been trying to do with this type of personality within your own kind of business?
So the A-type personality, they're like the alphas. So if you know anything about wolves, you'll have an alpha who's in charge of everything, and they want to be the boss, and they want to go do stuff, and they don't want to just sit around doing nothing. They need activity. They need to keep going. So I sometimes say it's like herding feral cats, but once you kind of get them all in the same motion, in the same direction, that's great. And they don't necessarily want to be the boss, but inactivity is a problem for them. So if you could start giving them things to do and kind of guidance and directions, then you can kind of get them going in the same direction. These are the kinds of people who are typically drawn to law enforcement and corrections. It's a sense of adventure. It's something to do. And you also see that in the emergency response. They want to be out there helping people. They want to do something, just the normal everyday job that most people they don't find interesting. They've got to be doing something active. So trying to tap into that energy and get it directed in the same direction can be a challenge sometimes, but usually that's all they're looking for, is just some guidance and then something to do.
That's actually really interesting. And I've been in a couple of these situations. What do you do when you've got a room full of alphas and you need them to accomplish something?
Yeah, you just find something to do, even if it's me, hey, that garbage is overflowing. Could you go take care of that? And hey, we got this going on, go do that. And then, maybe set off some break off teams. If you know that you have something coming up, but you're not sure what the eventual outcome is going to look like, send them off, start doing some pre-planning. That helps in a couple of ways, because if they're involved in the pre-planning, they're more likely to buy into the plan, and they're more likely to make it successful because it's their plan. But it also keeps them busy and keeps them doing something until you need them. So that's a big thing for this kind of personality, is give them something to do, anything to do, because if you don't, they're going to find something to do, and it might not be what you want them to be doing.
That's exactly what I do with my rooms of alphas. Otherwise, you get a whole amount of chaos out of them.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
So you do a lot of volunteering. Do you do a lot of volunteering outside of, because your consultancy deals with the kind of leadership aspects of things? What part of that is volunteering, and what part of it is something that you do with inside your business?
Honestly, I've been helping friends for years with their leadership and gaining promotions and mentoring. So I would do it even if I'm not running a business. I would find some way to do it. It's just what I like to do. I like to be a helper. I like to be a teacher. I love teaching. And so trying to help guide people to their future or towards their goals, I would do that regardless. I usually do it inside work, not in some sort of structure outside my consultancy. Then outside work, the volunteering I am involved with is my wife has a dog rescue, mostly dachshunds, but all kinds of different breeds of dogs. And to date, we've placed 2,500 dogs into homes. And then she's recently started a horse rescue. So we've got all kinds of equines at the house too that we're trying to find homes for. So it's just something that I like and I do, and trying to give back to my community.
Where do you find the space to put all of these animals?
It can be difficult. We live in the country. We have a little plot, about 9 acres, and we just somehow manage with everybody, and they require a lot of time, but sometimes it's not really time or work, because you're really enjoying what you're doing with them and seeing the progress that they make and spending time with them. It
sounds like such a fulfilling life to be leading. And I see that one thing that you say is that your battle-tested leadership skills have no effect on your dogs or your wife. Have you tried?
Yeah, it's a little bit different in that environment. It's tough to be a prophet in your homeland. People have their own opinions, and especially with your wife, your spouse, your significant other, it's a relationship of peers. So you just do the best you can and try to move on.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us today, Dennis. As normal, time has gone so fast. Do you want to kind of give everybody an indication of where they can find you on the internet?
So I have a webpage. It's www.dennismossburg.com. You can contact me through email. That's dennismossburg@gmail.com. And most of my social handles are Dennis Mossburg. I understand you're going to have links to make it easy for people to reach. And those are probably about the best ways to reach me.
And everything's going to be tagged underneath. And we hope you've really enjoyed this episode. It has been an absolute pleasure having you with us today, Dennis. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you so much. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and a review, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if you're on one of the major platforms that we're on audio, subscribe on there, because you don't want to miss any more amazing content. Thanks again, Dennis.
Thank you.
You've been watching on YouTube or listening on an audio platform to the Kunoa podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any amazing content, and don't forget to leave us a review.
Kunoa coaching.